Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome to our illustration class. Excuse me. So I know that I'm sure we'll have some more people trickling in here as always, but I wanted to kind of touch base and get things moving here. So last class, if you recall, I really spent a good bit of that class introducing the bare bones basics of the assignment. If you missed that class, I'd highly suggest that you go back and watch that recording. And you can do so either on our YouTube page or on Collaborate by clicking on those three little lines and then hitting the record tab. So I went through and introduced what our next assignment is going to be. You are picking a silhouette, an outline of your home state. And again, if you come from a different state or a different region, you are welcome to pick your home country, that kind of idea. Or if you come from more than one region, then pick the one that you prefer. It's fine. I want you to think of 3 to 5 things that comprise that region. So in my case, I'm from Pennsylvania. So as a class, we went through, we found a whole bunch of stock images to utilize. I pulled those in. Now I'm using Krita. You could be using GIMP. You could use Photoshop. Any digital painting software will work just fine. But I pulled those images in and kind of made a composition, placing those images, thinking about the rule of thirds. We talked about that last class, kind of where to place certain objects in the intersection whenever you're dividing up a window into thirds, or 9 squares, right? Thirds. Those little intersections are where you should have the most prominent aspects. Now you can pick, maybe there's a famous person from your region, or a famous location. Maybe there's a famous building, or maybe there's a famous thing that occurred, right? So if I'm doing Pennsylvania, I could have shown a picture of Gettysburg, right? Some Gettysburg Civil War monument, or like a soldier or something like that. So lots of different directions that you can take this as far as making your composition. Once you've made that composition, then again, I really want to encourage you to not trace. However, like we talked about before, you are allowed to kind of make some quick little rough measurements. That's only for the sake of expediency, to speed things up a little bit. If we had all the time in the world, I would tell you not to even do that. Eventually, we want to get to the point where you can just kind of freehand draw digitally or paint digitally and feel comfortable doing just that. So kind of migrating, kind of moving forwards here as we're going along. So we're jumping into this state painting. And technically speaking, this state painting is also your midterm, which again, we've talked about before. I'm going to place those midterm grades in, but it's not weighted any differently. So really, honestly, all I'm planning on doing is actually adding all of the grades that you've got until now. So basically, whatever the heck you have on Blackboard, that percentage I'll put in as your midterm, basically saying this is your where you are currently in the class, as opposed to just putting in that one project. I'm going to put in what you have earned thus far. But again, remember that that midterm grade doesn't get factored into anything. It's more of a benchmark saying here's where you are so far in the class. So don't think that I'm going to take that grade or that percentage and work it into something. It's just a benchmark. I don't want to say that you should ignore your midterm, but you could kind of ignore your midterm. The grade. So we're going to keep going. We're going to go into this state project, the kind of the outline of the region with the 3 to 5 things. I wouldn't do any more than 5. Truth be told, 3 is probably enough, just because of how much time we have. We want to be able to finish these. Now, again, just going over some of the specifics before I jump back into my previous demo and ask any questions that you guys have, obviously. Remember that on Blackboard, if you click on course content and go into project number 3, this assignment, there are a number of folders. The first one is the project specifications, and that project specs page, actually I can just show you here, that project specs page is where you're going to get all of the nitty-gritty detail about this assignment. Again, you might have already done that. You should have already done that is a better way to say it. Here we go. So I'm right here, course content. Here's the project specs page folder. And then I've got 3 separate folders here. The collage, that's what we did kind of last class, how to make the actual collage, right? Blocking in, that's kind of what we started doing last class. You can see here, this is where we left off last class. Right here, we kind of started blocking in with these rough, basic color forms, right? Really just kind of blocking in these kind of rough colors we want to use. There's no detail. There's definitely no outlines or anything like that. This is about where we left off. That's the blocking in phase. And then finally, detailing. And detailing is going to be kind of what we're focusing on today. How do we finish this picture? How do we add more details. And there are really two ways that you can go about detailing in a digital painting. So one, especially if you're using Photoshop, you can use a brush that blurs, or a brush that smudges, or something like that. And you can actually go in, and smudge these colors around, and they'll kind of blend and mix right on your canvas. Me personally, today, I'm going to focus on not smudging. I find that I get much better results when I just paint more colors. So for example, if I want to blend between this dark brown and this gray, it makes way more sense to me as a painter to find a color. So like right in here, I'm going to go ahead and find a color that's somewhere in between these two, and I'm just going to paint that color. Now that's a pretty big brush right there. Let's do something a little smaller here. So I'm just going to paint this color in here, right? Then again, grab my color picker tool, and between this light brown and dark brown, let's find a color here, and I can always come over to my color wheel and kind of adjust that accordingly. And I'm going to paint that color. That's a little bit too bright, maybe. Let's take it down a little bit darker, right? And eventually, I don't want you to use your color picker at all. Eventually, I just want you to start eyeballing this. But just like we did with our grayscale painting, the reason I had you do that previous painting, right? We went through with the grayscale and we kept adding, we started with the three values, shadow, midtone, and highlight, and we kept adding more and more value, more and more grayscale, until we eventually had something that felt much more realistic. That's what we're doing here. We're only doing it in color. So we're just going to keep adding more and more values until eventually get to the point where, for example, so let's say I go from this gray to this kind of brownish gray, and now I'm into brown. Well, let's do it again. I'm going to make another selection here. I'm just using my eyeball tool here, my eyedropper, excuse me. So I've got gray, I've got brown, and then something in the middle. And again, I'm going to adjust it ever so slightly, kind of manually do that there, right? Now up close, we can see, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, right? 4 separate color values. But the further and further away you get, the softer that transition starts to become. And you just keep kind of pushing, keep nudging this a little bit. You're going to have hundreds and hundreds of colors on here, right? Hundreds of colors. But eventually you're going to get to the point where you're happy with the results, and it'll start feeling like it's all kind of coming together, like it's all starting to blend and merge together. So that's what we're going to focus on today. And again, I want to encourage you to do that, but you are allowed for this assignment, you are totally allowed to use a smudge or a blur tool to try and kind of push your paint around on the canvas. Plenty of artists have great success doing that. It's just not my personal technique. So I've got other videos here to kind of help you along the way. I have a previous demo that I did. I have a previous demo specifically on blending your colors right here, kind of like we're talking about here, by adding more and more color to the painting. And then I've got 2 other videos here that are not mine, but we'll talk about different methodologies for adding these kind of values and these colors, okay? So again, different directions to go. Please utilize whatever works best for you. That's primary number 1 here, is to make sure you're doing what works for you. But remember to reference back to this project spec sheet. So again, I've got examples of what a finished version of this project will look like, kind of that silhouette of the state or country. Okay, and then 3 to 5 examples, 3 to 5 images kind of merge together, right? So you can see the sign here for Virginia just kind of fades into the mountains. I don't expect anything to be like harshly outlined. It can all kind of blur and smudge together. That's fine as far as your images. Okay. Again, right here, this is our actual specification here, or the assignment itself. Please note that this project, again, it is going in as our midterm. And so this project is due Friday, February 26th. That is not this coming Friday. That is next Friday. Okay, next Friday. That's what that's going in. It's worth 15 points, which again, you can tell is not weighted. That's the same amount as your previous project. And again, everything we've already previously talked about is here explained in text as well. Whew, okay, and then if you're curious about your grade, right there's the rubric. That's what I use to make sure that it's as impartial as possible. This isn't my opinion grading you. This is using these kind of little benchmarks here. So we're looking for your usage of color, right? Making sure it's not just like all the shades of brown, that there are hints of blues and yellows, and you're using other colors. Your reference, making sure that it looks like kind of a realistic depiction. It's not just squiggles all over the place. And then your overall composition, and that has nothing to do with your digital painting. That has to do with your collage, right? So you're making sure that your images aren't all packed into one side and you have a whole lot of negative space up on one side. You want to make sure that it's well balanced, that it's a nice solid composition. Also, just as a kind of house cleaning note, please don't forget to jump onto the discussion board as every week. This is where we do our attendance posts, and at this point we are on week 6. That's where we're at currently, week 6, and then we got week 7 next week, and that's midterms, right? Now, my best suggestion for you is this. This is going in as your midterm project. You also, I'm sure, have other midterm projects, right? Or other midterm classes. So you got a math final, you got a English paper due, all these other things that are going to be due for your midterms. My suggestion, and this is just me now, so we've still got a couple days left in this week, and we've got obviously all of next week to do this. If you finish this project ahead of time, get this project done by, like, I don't know, Monday or Tuesday, or even get it done by Wednesday of next week. That's still a number of days away. If you get this project done ahead of time, then you have that much more time to devote to your other midterms. So as opposed to doing a little bit in all of your classes and running out the clock, try to knock out what projects you can ahead of time, and that way you can focus your attention on your other classes whenever they spring a test or something on you. You know there's no pop quizzes, there's no nothing. You know exactly what's coming at you in this entire course. So that will be our midterm. That's week 7, and that means that we are halfway through the rest of the semester. Now, just as a blanket statement, our next assignment after this digital painting of the state, our next assignment is to totally switch gears. We're going to jump into true illustration in the sense of not digital painting with Photoshop or GIMP or Krita. We're going to jump into Inkscape and or Illustrator. So we're going to be using vectors for our next assignment after the midterm. This is a totally different thing. If you've taken graphic design before, then you're going to feel right at home. If you haven't, I'll give you some background on how vectors actually work. Now, once we do this, there's multiple stages to this assignment. And once we wrap that up, then we're going to start with our final. And we're going to start our final ahead of time, not just the last week of school, but we'll actually start it much longer in advance because there are multiple parts to this big final project where you will be doing digital illustration, digital vector, based illustration, digital painting. You're going to be doing everything you've learned in this class all in one big finale. And that's it. That's the class, right? 5 simple, easy projects that hopefully when you leave, you'll have left with much more information, much more knowledge than you started with in the first place, okay? All right, so before I totally switch gears here real quick, again, I noticed that I haven't seen anyone post their current composition, their current picture to the discussion board, so I don't have anything to actually reference as far as critiquing or anything like that. I am more than happy to critique, so if at any point in time you would like to say you want to email me or post your image and you want some comments or some kind of critique on it, please just drop me an email and say, here's my picture so far, what do you think? Or I'm painting this and I'm having a hard time. You can reach out to me at any point in time. Okay, I will be available to answer any and all questions, even if it's outside of just this tiny little class period that we have. I'm available much more outside of the class. So please, again, take it upon yourself. Don't just keep hammering away and hope that things are going to get better. Just ask me a question. You're paying good money to get my assistance, right? So let me assist. All right, so that being said, before we jump back into my previous demo, the previous painting, that's what I'm going to work on today. And I'll explain kind of what I'm doing in the process that I'm doing. Do you guys have any questions for me so far as the composition, as far as maybe previous assignments, grades, anything in this class, anything not in this class, anything in general with campus life, I don't know what. Do you guys have any questions that I can help you with? If you do, feel free to raise your hand or drop it in the chat room. Okay. All right. Well, if you do at any point in time, please just turn on your microphone or drop it in the chat room there. I will happily answer any and all questions that you guys have. So I've got my my little tablet here off on the side, and again, you could be doing this on your iPad or anything else if you wanted. I've got my tablet off on the side. I have my kind of hotkey set up so I can make my paintbrush bigger or smaller, right, like so. I've got my paintbrush set up right now where I can actually rotate it. See how I'm kind of like turning the angle of the paintbrush by twisting my little stylus here. So that can be kind of helpful sometimes. I've played around with a couple of other of these brushes using Krita. I actually like kind of more of a square shaped brush, so I'm going to stick with that. That's just my personal take. There are plenty of artists who only use round brushes, or maybe like a highly textured brush if you want something more like that. There's lots of other options. Find what works for you, especially if you're using Photoshop, or even if you're using Procreate. You can make your own brushes. So that's something too. And then also don't forget the eraser. The eraser is a brush as well. I mean, you can use the eraser to your advantage if you ever need to clean something up. So for example, I'm going to switch my eraser from kind of the normal little eraser mode here, right? And I can kind of switch it up. What if I change my eraser to another paintbrush, right? And now I can paint one direction, and maybe I have a second color loaded up in my second direction here, right? So there's lots of different angles. Let's see here, paint, paint, paint. Oop. And just by flipping my paintbrush around, I can switch it up. So lots of different directions that, that you can take your kind of styling. Again, in this project here, or excuse me, in this picture here, I also have different types of erasers. So I have a kneaded eraser, can make things kind of more transparent. I have a smaller eraser, get little teeny tiny lines. So I'm going to stick with my kneaded eraser here, and I'm going to stick with my kind of squared off paintbrush. And again, like I said, truly find what works best for you. So I'm going to continue on the process of kind of blocking in my colors. Today's going to be a relatively hands-off class, so truly, if you do have questions along the way, I really want you guys to vocalize those questions for me if you don't mind. I'm going to pull up my example, my little picture here, if it decides to load. Oop, there it is. Okay, so this is what we're making, right? That was the rough composition that we were working on previously. I'm just going to tuck this up in the corner so I have something to reference, just like so. And then we're going to pull this back just a little bit so I can actually see what the heck I'm doing. Okay, looking pretty good. So yeah, I'm just going to start roughing things in a little bit. I'm still in that kind of blocking in phase. This is not a finished thing. Probably by the end of our class, it won't totally get there. And that's okay. This is going to be a time-consuming process. So let's look at his outfit here. I see I've got kind of a blue, kind of a navy blue outfit, uniform. So I'm trying to match that. It's got a little more gray to it, I think. Kind of more in that range, something like that. Let's see. It's a little purplier. I think I need to make it a little more blue. That's better, a little bit more kind of muted. So I'm just going to kind of, again, scrub in these colors here real quick. Notice that I'm not really staying in the lines because, again, at a certain point, all of this is going to get, all of these outlines and everything, they're all going to get turned off, and we're just going to have just our paint. That's all it's going to be left. And that's what I want. Now, you could paint on multiple different layers. So maybe I want to paint the football player on one layer and the Liberty Bell on another layer. All that is totally something that you could do. Again, for the sake of the demo, I'm going to stick with one big old layer. And that is totally because it's speeding up the process. But you can absolutely use multiple layers. It's not like one is better than the other. Again, similar to using paintbrushes, is going to matter, or you'll find what works best for you. Okay, so it looks like the Liberty Bell is behind the football player right there. Let's grab like I need a little bit of a lighter blue, so I'm going to kind of zoom in here for a second on a picture. So he's got some highlights up here where the light is hitting him. Looks like he's got some sleeves on, or at least he's got a sleeve on one of his arms. I guess that's in case he forgets which one is the right or which one's the left. It can be tricky sometimes, you know, you just don't know exactly which arm is which. Let's get a nice kind of a lighter gray. And again, I'm using a bigger paintbrush, way bigger than I want to. It feels very uncomfortable drawing with a bigger paintbrush like this. But again, we're roughing it in. If you use a smaller paintbrush, you're really just making more work for yourself down the line because you're going to have to do a lot more painting. This way, I'm getting just something very quickly onto my canvas. And it allows me to very quickly see kind of the fruits of my labor a little bit, kind of get an idea of like, what is this going to look like? Almost like if you're kind of squinting your eyes and blurring your vision a little bit, what is this going to look like, right? So I'm just kind of placing some color on the picture. I also want to try my best to pick not just plain old blue. Clearly it's a blue jersey, right? But try to hunt around. What other colors are here, right? So maybe the collar looks almost a little bit purple. Not a lot, but let's see, this collar here. You always want to try and work in as many other colors as you possibly can, even if it's a challenge to you. You really want to try to work with other colors. It's going to really look more realistic because we don't have just a monochrome universe. There are colors all around us, constantly all around us. Oops, let's see. Come down here a little bit. And again, for right now, I'm just sticking to the jersey. Just moving around. Notice I'm not even really using the eyedropper tool. Just kind of finding what works for me. He's got some pretty gnarly shadows. Let's get a nice dark color here. Oh yeah. Look at all this shadow here on his arm. And I'm just kind of segmenting these areas into shadow and highlight. It is literally the exact same thing we did with the grayscale, but now it's a little bit more challenging because I'm using colors instead of my grayscale. If you ever find that you're extremely stuck, like you're just not sure what to do, if you ever feel like that, back up a little bit, make a new layer, and literally do it in grayscale. Sometimes just seeing it in a grayscale kind of mode is enough for your brain to kind of say, oh, that's where the shadow is, right? It feels silly, it feels like more work, but I promise you it's not. More work is, as I've seen many students try to do, is doing a project and then turning in something that's kind of like half finished or half done, or it's all scribbled because you've spent so much time redoing and redoing and redoing. You're better off, it's kind of the old phrase, right? If it's worth doing right. So take the time, do it correctly. And you guys know my motto. I'd always rather you guys turn in something that is unfinished, but done well, right? And I mean that in all honesty. I will never fault you if you just need a little bit of extra time. The deadline for our projects they're relatively arbitrary, right? It's not like anyone is forcing me to make these deadlines. I just want to move the class along. So clearly, if you need a little bit more time, that's an honorable, honest thing. Right? There's nothing wrong with that. Don't beat yourself up because you need some more time. What you should do is beat yourself up if you are taking the time that you have and squandering it. So don't waste time. Jump on into an assignment, jump on into your project, and make it happen. All right, so that looks pretty good. I can kind of tell where like the front and the side are, so that's pretty good. I've got some extra color in there. I could also kind of squeeze out maybe some other colors, put some greens or something in there, but we'll cross that bridge later. Let's keep going with this fella. We're going to finish this guy up. So I've got his kind of his skin tone and his helmet. I'm going to stick with his helmet for now. Now his helmet clearly is white, but you really don't ever want to use pure black or pure white. It kind of blows out the picture. It's like too much. So I'm going to have to choose, is this a warm white or a cool white? If it's cool, I could use gray or blue. If it's warm, I could use like an orange or a red and just have it slightly tinted or, just a little bit to away from pure white into a little bit more of a chromatic white. In my eyes, I mean, it's definitely a cool white. Just because his outfit is blue, I want to get a little bit of like reflective blue. So I'm going to start with like a light gray. It's kind of a neutral. And this will be my base. And notice how just right away, it's still totally white, but man, is that nicer than just like a pure extreme kind of white. It's not nearly as oppressive, right? It's not like jumping down your throat saying, this is pure white, right? In paintings and that, you really want to avoid pure white and pure black, unless you're doing a grayscale. Of course, that doesn't really count then. Even then, you really want to avoid pure black and pure white. It just very rarely in our universe will you ever see pure white or pure black. It just don't really exist. And that's because we live in a world with 3 dimensions, right? Now, I mentioned before, I'm not going to do the numbers on his jersey. I'm going to keep it kind of neutral, I guess. So we're not going to do that. But he does have a little emblem here on his jersey. We'll throw something in there just to kind of symbolize that. He's got little patches here. And the best part about a painting is you can always just change your mind. If later I'm looking at it and I say, boy, I really do need those those little numbers on there to finish the design, well then do it. I'm going to put a little bit of some blue here. Now, I don't, with my naked eye, I don't see much blue on that helmet. However, because he's wearing a blue outfit, because it's a white helmet, there's no way there isn't some reflected light onto this helmet. There just isn't. So I'm going to take a little bit of artistic liberty here and kind of pump up that blue, probably more than it actually is in real life. But I promise you, if I took this photo into Photoshop and I started grabbing at colors, you would see a little bit of blue in there. Very rarely, again, are things going to be this kind of pure white or pure black. They almost always have some kind of value to them. Maybe a little bit darker gray, a little bit of shadow here up towards the top. Color that in. Again, if it's not perfect, don't worry about it, because all this, just like your outlines here, all this is going to get colored over again anyway, right? You're doing layers after layers after layers of different colors, right? So just placing some color, whatever you see, whatever you're confident in, you're just placing that. So I've got this almost black line on the front, but I think it's just a little bit navy. I'm just going to place a nice solid black line right there. It goes pretty far down on the helmet, doesn't it? Just like that, right down the middle. Okay. Now we've got the actual kind of skin tone, and for that I'm just going to kind of pick a normal, just kind of even keel kind of base. So I'm going to pick like a neutral kind of tan beige color. Not really sure who this person is, and I'm not really all that worried about it. Just getting something on here. Whoa, that was my tablet messing up. I really got to figure out, that's like the 18th time that's happened, hasn't it? Yeah, just placing colors. Now, this is when like having layers would really make things easier, right? I would just put the skin tone on a background layer to the helmet, but I'm stubborn, so we're just gonna keep on keeping on. Again, I'm tempted to make a smaller paintbrush because I want to get into details here with his face, but really don't. Try to keep the biggest paintbrush that you possibly can. It's hard. I think it's hard. It's definitely, see, stupid mouse. I think it's hard, but really try to do yourself a favor and keep that big paintbrush. You can always make a smaller paintbrush later. You got plenty of time. Nice heavy shadows there for the eyes, kind of tucked underneath, maybe a little bit of shadow for the nose. And again, really, I mean, this is pretty rough, right? Here's a shadow for like the helmet there. Now it's nice because I'm using this drawing tablet is I can press softer and get a soft line, or harder and get a hard line. So just having that pressure sensitivity, that's why we're using these drawing tablets as opposed to just drawing with our mouse. A lot of times students ask, well, can I just draw with the mouse? I mean, physically you are able to draw with the mouse, but I would not suggest it because it doesn't have pressure sensitivity, right? Here, I'll use my mouse for a second. When I'm painting, it's the same. Whether I press lightly or hard on my mouse, it is the same every time. With my tablet, I have a lot more precision. I can really, look at this, how soft that is. This is how we're going to get those colors to blend, right? By having a softer value to play with, right? So for right now, we're just kind of pushing down and really hammering down on those colors, you know, kind of getting those blocked in colors on there. But eventually, we won't. Okay, he's got these kind of pads on the side of his helmet here. Now, I know he's got the grid across his face, but my brush is way too big right now to hammer that grid out. So I'm just going to put kind of an indication that there's something there, and I'll worry about the details in that later. Okay. He's got these little flaps up top here. Yeah, I think that's good enough for now. Now, you might notice we've got these little spots that are missing, right? These little hollow areas. You really do want to try and close those off. You should have nothing from the background showing through, whether you're on a separate layer or not. You really want to try and fill those spaces in. So I'm just going to go ahead and do just that. Grab my colors here. And again, remember, in my case, I'm all on one big old layer. And yours, you might be on smaller layers. That's fine. And don't worry if you mess something up, because again, we're just blocking it in. None of this is perfect. So I've got his arm with a glove, and then he's got this sleeve arm with another glove, and again, kind of like a black sleeve there. So let's do that. All right, so black sleeve, it's definitely not black, right? It's almost the same kind of color as like the stripe on his helmet. It's definitely a really dark, dark navy blue. So let's pull up our blue section here. Probably more on the blue, like the cyan, and less on the purple. Get a really dark value here. There we go. Again, bigger paintbrush, paint larger than you need. You can always paint over it or erase later. Start with big shapes, just like we did for our black and white paintings. Big shapes of color. And then slowly kind of chip away into it. So this is kind of the highlighted part of the arm. And again, really just very, very basic, right? Nothing fancy to it. There's his little hand, excuse me, and the football. Let's do the football first. We'll put the hand on top of the football. So we need kind of a brown value here, nice earthy kind of brown. I'm just going to top it in. Look, I got this white stripe here. If I paint over it, who cares? Paint over it. No, what do you do? I'm going to mess up on purpose. What happens if my brown goes over top of my jersey, right? If that's the case, right now, don't worry about it. You still want to take the time to hammer out kind of your lighter and your darker values. I'm going to throw on my highlights. So there's kind of a highlight right here. Look, I mean, that's not even brown. That's the color red, right? But put on top of this brown, and it feels like it belongs there. Get my shadows. My shadows are going to be a cooler color. Maybe more into like the blue range. Brown is kind of hard because it's not technically on the color wheel, so you have to kind of find it. I think my brown is more of a red, so red's complementary colors can be more in the green range. Let's see, something like that. Let's pull it kind of neutral. It looks pretty green. Let's see. Yeah, that's not horrible. Understanding color theory, if you had like a painting class, if you remember your color values and all this jazz, that can be really beneficial to you sometimes. Knowing what colors go well together and what colors don't go well together. So this is green, but put on top of a reddish football and it kind of just morphs into a shadow color. Now again, I definitely went over his uniform here. So I'm just going to grab the same blue that I was using a second ago. Just going to paint right over top. And just like magic, suddenly I'm looking at something where his outfit is back on top. Right? Same deal, I'm going to go ahead and grab some white because his gloves are white. And again, I could find that kind of neutral grayish white that I used before, or I could just steal it. So I'm going to just go ahead and do that. I just used the color picker, stole this color right off of his helmet. So I did it once, why reinvent the wheel? And heck, I've got this glove down here, let's go ahead and color that in too. And just like we did with our black and white picture, oops, I'm starting with a solid shape, and I'll add value to that solid shape. If you guys have any questions as we're going along, I'm more than happy to talk about something other than what I'm doing. Do you guys have any questions about your projects or anything like that? You can turn your mic or you can talk in the chat room. And I'm just looking for shadows, highlights, things like that. Again, it's pretty rough. It's supposed to be. Don't get down on yourself if things aren't, perfect at this stage. They're really not supposed to be. With his arm kind of painted in here. Again, all this stuff, obviously it helps if you've had a previous art class talking about anatomy, if you've, drawing, everything kind of builds on itself. But notice that drawing and painting, whether digital or with paints, are pretty different, right? Drawing is much more about precision and keeping things really tight and clean from the very get-go. Painting is about shapes and blobs and just kind of throwing something on there and then fixing it later, right? So painting is definitely, if you're more of an imperfect kind of person, if you're more just kind of hoping for the best and you know, swinging through life, you'll have an easier time with painting. If you are more of a precision-based person, if you really like to be, you know, hyper perfect every single time, then painting is going to be more of a challenge to you because it is definitely an imperfect medium. Again, whether it's digital or otherwise. The only nice part about going digital is you have an undo button, so that does help a little bit. But of course, if you like digital painting, if you like kind of the illustration stuff that we're getting into, please note that you are pretty easily able to transfer these abilities, these skills, over into painting on a canvas. It is very, very similar. Right? I'm going to move my color wheel here. Let's get some more warm, some more red. Kind of warm this up a little bit. Also kind of harking back to like the same warmth of the football. And when I say using color in your picture, this is what I'm talking about, right? It's not that you're doing these crazy hard swings, unless you're stylistically going for that. It's not that you're doing these crazy hard swings into different directions, but use the whole color wheel instead of just hanging out and picking within this range, right? But the same color, you're just picking different values of that color. Change it up. What happens if I want to add a little bit of yellow to his skin, right? A little kind of orangey yellow here with a highlight? Why not? None of the colors are so extreme that it's, you know, throwing things off. But I'm just thinking about where are the highlights, where are the shadows, maybe some a little more neutral gray here for like a really bright highlight on his arm. Kind of like that. All right, look, I've got a little gap here in his shoulder. I'm going to grab that real quick. Fill that in. Feels good. Okay, got to do his pants still. Give this guy some pants. And again, he's rocking some white pants, so let's get some that same white we used just a second ago. As big a paintbrush as you feel comfortable using, and then go one notch bigger. Just fill that in. Now, I don't remember exactly where the edge of the state is, so I know I'm going to crop off these pants eventually, but I'm going to take them right off the page. Whoa, I messed that up. Try that again. With a bigger paintbrush. Make my life easier. Okay, let's get a nice kind of shadow color. Again, I'm just taking that color that was already previously there. Kind of push this leg back a little bit in distance. If I go a little more blue with that, let's see what that does. Sometimes cooler colors can act as a shadow. That's annoying. And then I can use warmer colors, still in the neutral, right? I'm still down here in kind of the neutral gray white zone. But by making it a little bit warmer, it's going to come towards us a little bit. You can see it's more of like a peach kind of tone. Still in the white zone, still a pair of white pants, right? But again, use your color wheel. Really use that color wheel and see what happens. You're going to open yourself up to a lot if you're willing to kind of explore. Okay, so again, blocking things in. Whoops. Get out of here. It's starting to look like something. Again, zero detail, right? But yeah, that's a football player. I mean, I can tell that pose. I see what's happening. Okay. Now, in my case, of course, I've got different backgrounds with these, but I wanted one unified background. So last class we went through and created that one single unified background. Remember that, again, you also have your kind of state outline. Let's see if we can pull that up real quick. There's our state outline. I'm going to go ahead and drag this to the top. Now, you don't have to do this. I just want to show you for the sake of the demo where we're at so far. So this is what we're looking at, right? His arm just falls off a little bit right there. Legs go off the page. So we're just making sure that everything's still kind of floating. But I would suggest almost turning this off. And there's a reason for that. Because otherwise you're going to be really tempted to purposefully stop right at that line. And inevitably, I can't tell you how many times I've seen it, inevitably something will go off where you try to move your football player or some element around, and then you have to repaint this little sliver. If you just have him hanging right off the page like his legs, cropping that is super easy. So I'm almost going to encourage you to just leave your state painting off. Once you've got the generic kind of, okay, this is the background, just leave it off and see what happens. I think you'll have a better time with it. Now for the city, I'm going to go ahead and do just this. I'm going to make a new layer. I know I was painting on one single layer before, but we're going to make a new layer. I'm going to push the city here, Old Philadelphia. Let's push him in the background. So again, looking at my reference, just like so. So we get the kind of new modern buildings. I've got the old kind of colonial buildings. I've got some blues and some kind of beige orange over here. This one here, I've got kind of a brownish and a white, and then the statue on the top. So lots of different cool colors, but all relatively neutral colors. So let's get in here, and again, just blocking stuff in, right? Same as before, same as before. And let's see, so we're gonna grab some of this, I need some of this blue here. I think it's a really beautiful building. Let's get some of that, I think kind of a cyan maybe? Maybe more of a blue, something like that. And again, using the biggest brush possible and just throwing in some values. Doesn't have to be pretty. No one's gonna ask questions, because no one's ever gonna see this. This is all an underpainting. This is all going underneath our picture. Let's see, can I use that blue elsewhere? I can. Right over here on this guy. All that blue right there. Okay. Now, here's the thing. Look at the shadow on the white part right here. Why not just make that like a blue shadow? We got the same color here. Let's mix it up a little bit. Look like a neutral blue. It looks gray. Actually, the color blue. I'm going to come over here, and I'm just going to kind of jump around the canvas a little bit. Again, different strokes for different folks, right? I prefer kind of jumping around the canvas. Other artists will make one perfect building at a time, or one perfect element at a time. Please feel free to do what works for you. There is not one perfect way of doing this. There's not one perfect way of painting. It's not one perfect way of doing anything, really. So again, please really feel comfortable to kind of make it your own a little bit. So just working on this nice little colonial building here. Little highlight right there on the roof right there. Got that little kind of clock. Paint him in there. Just changing my colors. Changing my value. I'm all still in the kind of white range because it's a colonial kind of building. But again, there's color in there. Hopefully this colors that I'm talking about, where there's blues and greens and yellows and oranges, and really want to kind of make it your own. Oh, yeah, who's talking? What do you got? Oh, throwing one stone twice. Okay. Well, anytime. Feel free to jump in. Just kind of talking to entertain myself a little bit. Okay. Now that building's kind of in there. Again, just roughing it in, just blocking it in. So when you see that chapter on blocking in, this is what we're talking about. Just looking for any heavy shadows, any major highlights, anything like that. There's one building, looks pretty good. I'm just going to speed up the process here a little bit. Shift gears. Blocking everything and getting a bigger paintbrush I really feel comfortable with. Just hammering through some of this stuff. And all I'm really doing, you can't really see me on this end, but all I'm really doing is kind of squinting my eyes and saying, if I had to paint this whole building one single flat color, if I had to choose, what would that color be? And that's what I'm doing. And I'm just painting it that color without any thought, rhyme, reason, nothing. Just squinting and painting. Half the difficulty in painting, more than half the difficulty in painting, comes from just putting something on the canvas. I can't tell you how many artists I've talked to in my life that are just genuinely a million times better than me, but are stunted in some way. They've held themselves back because they never bother to actually paint. They just don't know where to start. But this is where you start. Right here. You're just grabbing something, plunking it on. Doesn't matter if it's good, doesn't matter if it's bad. Again, we've got digital art, right? So heck, if it's bad, you just hit undo. But even if it's not digital, even if you're painting traditional, all you need to do is paint over it. It's really not any harder than that. Just paint over it. If you don't like something, just let it go. Don't be so precious, that you can't let something go. Now, guys, just as a heads up, at any point in time, obviously, if you need to head out, by all means, go ahead. If you do have questions, again, please vocalize. Let me help you. That's the best advice I can give you. We're going to kind of get to a stopping point in a little while here where I'm done blocking everything in. And then definitely during our next class even, we're going to get into more and more detailing. But I'm going to block in the rest of this cityscape, and then I'm going to start doing a little bit of detailing on the Liberty Bell. And that's probably where we're going to call it a day. So just kind of give you a heads up on where we're at and what we're going to be getting into today. That's kind of where we're going here. So I'm still going to be around and painting up a storm, trying to help you guys learn something new. But if you have any questions, like I said, please vocalize. Let me help you. The best thing I can do. Just kind of roughing things in. Again, bigger paintbrush than I need. Finding what works. Whoa. Again. Starting to kind of come together a little bit. All right. I'll merge these two layers so that they are, in fact, one single painting, just like so. And I'm also going to turn off my original outline because I don't need that anymore because I've got everything I need right here. So again, at this point, this is a pretty good kind of pause point where we can say, okay, everything has been blocked in. All my colors are here. Everything I need, the palette is set, right? The painting is here. I can just barely see where everything's going to go. I have to figure out what I'm going to do about the city here. Am I going to take them down into the shadows? Am I going to let them maybe fade out into this crazy cool background? What am I going to do? Well, so what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to keep painting, and I'm going to start doing some detail work on the Liberty Bell. It's not going to get finished today, but I'm just going to keep working. If you guys are able to hang out and keep watching, by all means. If you aren't, feel free to go back and watch this recording later on. And then, like I said, next class, we're going to get into doing detail on the person as well as on the city. So we've got an object, a landscape, and a person here, a portrait. We're going to do a little bit of everything so we can kind of totally finish this painting. But again, the further away, when in doubt, just stand far away from your painting. Zoom out. If it looks like what you want it to look like from afar, you're probably doing pretty well, right? But up close, just weird, smudgy blocks. That's all it is, right? Painting in shapes, not lines. So I'm not squiggling lines everywhere. I'm painting in big blobs of shapes. Okay, so I'm going to keep playing around with this Liberty Bell, but again, if you have questions, all you have to do is chime in and ask. So if you guys are still with me, you can see here, I'm going through and just adding in hundreds of little tiny alterations, different colors, different values. It's the same blocking in process, but now we're going through and we're doing much, much more. Again, still thinking about shapes, but now I'm adding in, where are the shadows, where are the highlights? And this is kind of round 2, right? Then we'll go through and do everything with a round 2. Then we go back, again, shrink our paintbrush even more, maybe notch down our paintbrush's opacity. All right, that's our layer opacity, sorry. Notch down our opacity for our paintbrush, and then that's going to allow us to really start to blend and soften these values. We're just slowly focusing, slowly developing this. So again, going from a big paintbrush to a smaller paintbrush to inevitably an even smaller paintbrush and more detail every step of the way. So we're going to go ahead and save this. We're going to pause right here for today's class. I'm going to be hanging out with you. If you do have any questions, I'll be here for a whole nother hour being able to answer your questions. So while you're working on your projects, if you want to jump back in and share your project with me, you can just pop back in on the collaborate session. I will be here ready to help you out every step of the way. Okay? So if you guys do have any help or questions, anything like that, please let me know, and I will be here to help assist you. All right. Bye, guys.